Kate Mila Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. It's time for our Saturday book, and we're going to be continuing our synopsis of Stephan Schwartz's book, The 8 Laws of Change. Pretty much more than halfway through it. Couple of comments before I even start. Somebody was recommending this book, Fantasyland by Kurt Anderson. Check it out. I made a video of it. Well, I made several videos of it. I synopsized it at least a year and a half ago. I will later on, when I have time, I'll try to find it and put it in the playlist. But if you're desperate to watch it right away, you just scroll down and find it. And then somebody was asking about Stephen Hassan's research and his experience into cult thinking. The Cult of Trump, an excellent book, and it's mandatory. I have to mention it at least once a week. So those two books are really important. Now this book, The 8 Laws of Change, this will be video number 3. And before I start, I want to announce that I had a conversation with Stephan Schwartz the other day. We recorded quite a lengthy conversation about this book, and it will be the third time that he's come to our channel to share his writing and his experiences. Such an interesting life. However, I wanted to be sure that everybody knows that about half an hour into our conversation, he got interrupted, but kind of an emergency phone call, and we had to pick up later and continue the conversation. I just don't want everyone to think that it was a little short, half an hour. Oh, no, you don't get away that easily. It was quite a lengthy conversation. And, see, this is crooked. I want you to see me setting things on fire behind me. And I don't want you to miss the fact that there will be, when I upload them at the end of this book, I will upload the videos of my conversation about this book with Stephan Schwartz. I say it wrong 50% of the time. And just be aware that there are actually 2 parts, a shorter preliminary video, got interrupted, and then we started fresh. And if you do watch them and you decide at the end of the short one that you've had enough, I would really recommend sticking around for the second video, because as we progress through the video, it gets more and more and more interesting what he has to say about current events in the context of the book, The 8 Laws of Change. So, for those who might not know, we started video 1 and video 2 last week. This is video 3, and I would recommend going back and getting the first half of the book, because we are now on chapter 11, non-local consciousness. So he's talking about non-local consciousness. This is the concept that your awareness of reality and yourself is not centered in your brain. It's not like there's a little secret chamber in your brain that creates who you are. The brain transmits. Your consciousness is actually outside your body and uses your body. And this is a crucial element of how we function, and it's often overlooked. Non-local, non-physiological aspects of consciousness, in fact, often denied by people. And it's why small individual choices make such a big difference, because that consciousness is out there in the information field, is how Stephan Schwartz would characterize it, available to all people, influencing everyone in a larger collective. This is the essence of our being, and it lies in the non-local. It's your link with the matrix of life, and as he said, some people call it your connection to the divine, your connection to the spiritual, your connection to those who've come before and who will come in the future. He doesn't like to use the word energy. I'm drawing parallels to make it a little clearer for people. The Hermetic principles of our vibratory evolution to higher and higher planes. He emphasizes that distance, space, and time are meaningless. They're more adjectival. They help describe the situation for our inadequate brain. However, if you can think of all energy, or as he would say, all information, kind of in a soup of it, and our consciousness interacts with it. Just have to sort of tune in to connect properly. And in that way, when we elevate in an adjectival way, because it's very difficult to not talk in terms of space and time. Very difficult. It's how we're conditioned. So I'm going to point it out every time that I catch myself. I think that's one of the vital lessons of this book. It's not about going into the past to figure out what happened in the past and connect with past lives. It's not about looking into the future, because there's nowhere to go, because there's no space and there is no future. It's all in the moment, and it's all right here, right now. I'm already getting a headache. So, your link with the matrix is your consciousness. It's the matrix of life, the divine or the spiritual. Quakers believe that we can commune directly with the divine, and they're committed to lives that reflect this connection. And if you stop and think about it a minute and you set the terminology aside, isn't this what most belief systems advocate? So the 8 laws depend on a certain number of things. They depend on the non-local nature of being. In other words, these laws depend on the assumption that your brain is not manufacturing your awareness. Your brain helps to transmit the connection. That these laws depend on the non-locality of your consciousness. They depend on the power of individual choice, and they depend on the conscious connection to the divine. Schwartz says that research today challenges the idea that consciousness resides in the body. It's not. Inherently physical, and of just about anybody that we read on this topic, I would say Stephan is probably the closest to being very scientific and materialist, in the sense that just the facts. He wants the facts, and he does enormous amounts of research. Like, he refers to 10,000 plus research papers on this sort of topic, so he knows of which he speaks. Max Planck, the great scientist, said that consciousness is fundamental. Not only is it what we are, who we are, it's fundamental. Einstein said our delusion is that we are each separate in our body, and this keeps us imprisoned in a way, which is an interesting way to look at it. He said that a human being is a part of the whole called by us a universe, a part which is limited in time and space. This is our three-dimensional world, makes it dimension. There is no such thing. Anyway, he experiences himself, says Einstein, humans do, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of the consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So there comes a moment of change that's inspired by an experience that earns social acceptance, and the larger interpretation of the non-local experience becomes dogma, or it becomes a political movement. So let's do that again. So there's a moment of change, and it's inspired by sharing individual experiences, and they give us a larger interpretation. So you connect with other people based on your understanding of some experience or dogma or belief or whatever, political movement, for example. And an example would be Scientology. And Pol Pot would be another example. The Khmer Rouge. Gandhi is an example. Picasso is an example. Mahler, an example. These create a paradigm shift. Picasso shook up the art world, which was never the same. Mahler shook up the world of music, never the same. Now, Pol Pot and Gandhi are like diametric opposites. One did his actions and choices for the well-being of the larger society, and the other did his choices and decisions self-serving with no concern for the well-being of the larger society. And you see the outcome. They both have effective outcomes. It's all about what your motivation is and the quality of your choices. So the individuals who have these experiences are really good at explaining them. They're good at explaining why this moment of inspiration or paradigm shift moved them. And they're able to share a sense of being connected to a greater unity, timeless time and spaceless space. And here's an example of one of those individuals explaining what it is that lets him do what he does. And we're talking about the composer, Brahms, Johannes Brahms. Scientists often speak of the scales falling from the eyes or of the lightning flash of inspiration. In this exalted state, speaking of his own inspiration, I see clearly what is obscure in my ordinary moods. Then I feel capable of drawing inspiration from above as Beethoven did. Those vibrations assume the form of distinct mental image, and straightaway the ideas flow in upon me. Not only do I see distinct themes in the mind's eye, but they're clothed in the right forms, harmonies, and orchestration. Measure by measure, the finished product is revealed to me when I am in these rare, inspired moods. I have to be in a semi-trance condition to get such results, a condition when the conscious mind is in temporary abeyance. And the subconscious is in control, for it is through the subconscious mind, which is part of the omnipotence, capitalized, that the inspiration comes. And then they talk about, Stephan talks about Edgar Cayce. Casey says, in this state, how he did his, I don't know, what did he call it? Non-local perception, how he did his analysis of people. In this state of conscious mind, the conscious mind becomes subjugated to the subconscious or soul mind, and may and does communicate with like minds, and the subconscious or soul force becomes universal. From any subconscious mind, information may be obtained, either from this plane or from the impression as left by the individuals that have gone before. As we see a mirror reflected direct that which is before. So he's comparing this to a mirror reflection. In the 2nd century BC, the Yoga Sutras talk about non-local awareness through meditation. And you achieve a state of samyama, which is concentration, meditation, and profound absorption. It's communion with constraint. Another example is Saint Teresa of Avila, who said, "This magnificent refuge is inside you. Enter, shatter the darkness that shrouds the doorway. Be bold, be humble. Put away the incense and forget the incantations they taught you. Ask no permission from authorities. Close your eyes and follow your breath to the still place that leads to the invisible path that leads you home. Follow your breath." This is a Roman Catholic talking about a Buddhist concept, basically. In 2003, there was a study by Jung Beeman of the study of the neurobiological process of insight. How does consciousness solve problems? The study located an area of the brain that they were able to see activity in, specifically at that moment of accessing the subconscious. Other research studied the brains of religious members who practiced some sort of spiritual discipline, such as Buddhist nuns. And they located the area of activity when they are in deep meditation or prayer. And this led to a new discipline in science of neurotheology, studying the brain during the process of a religious experience. They also identified non-local perturbation and consciousness affecting the material reality at a distance. So this is using your mind to make things happen. And this is seen in studies of distant intentionality. In other words, for example, the brain of a healer shows activity when told to send healing. Stephan would say send is the wrong verb because you're not sending healing, you're intending healing. There's no distance to travel across. So the brain of the recipient showed activity in response to the activity in the brain of the healer. Both brains were affected. So this is a new area of quantum biology. So this is new science. We're becoming more open to these ideas, which go back to old belief systems with different words, same ideas. So life is a quantum process, which means basically it occurs on a microscopic molecular level, right down to the nitty-gritty. There's still no answers about the neural correlation of consciousness, the minimum mechanisms necessary to experience consciousness. It doesn't happen in the brain. They have studied and studied and studied. They've not been able to connect consciousness, conscious awareness to a place in the brain. They can find all other things, all other stuff humans do, but they cannot locate where, from what spot does consciousness derive. They try to explain consciousness in terms of the brain being material only, but this theoretical restriction is motivated primarily by ideas about the natural world that have been known to be fundamentally incorrect for more than 3/4 of a century. Minimum. Schwartz thinks that the answers will come from people's near-death experiences. So a Dutch study was done. It was a longitudinal study. In other words, it was done over non-existent time. It was done over a period of time. But in 2011, an English paper tried to explain away every aspect of near-death experiences. It parsed the entire experience. For example, opioid and adrenaline releases by the body, lower oxygen levels of the body. We've talked about this sort of explanation in, I think, Peter Fenwick's books about near-death experiences. But now there's a new field of medicine. We've got neurotheology, we've got quantum biology, and now we have resuscitation medicine as a brand new field, and it's challenging this materialist point of view. They're seeing longer and longer times before people are brought back, and sometimes they've even had cases where people have flatlined, no brain activity at all, for 6 hours. And yet when they come back with the story of a near-death experience, it's poo-pooed. Their monitoring that they use now is more precise, and it shows the falsity of previous explanations that dismissed near-death experiences. They're able to show that, well, you might write this off to adrenaline or neuro-opioid stuff, but that's not what's happening. So, and the number of reports of near-death experiences are growing. People are more aware of what they've experienced. They're less afraid to talk about it. And this includes Illinois Senator Mark Kirk, who had a stroke. And when he was revived from the stroke, he talked about seeing angels. Max Planck, the great scientist, proposed that the existence of non-local consciousness is independent of space, time, physiology, and that it's possible for a healer with strong intention to affect another, even separated by distance and time, because they really have no meaning. And all consciousness is interconnected and interdependent. Then I have a quotation here that I wanted to read to you, and it must be good because I wrote in the margin in huge capital letters, wow. Oh, and then I put red stars all around what he said. Wolfgang Pauli, 20th century physics immortal, said this: "It's my personal opinion that in the science of the future, reality will neither be psychic nor physical, but somehow both and somehow neither." And then in the next generation, physicist Olivier Coste de Beauregard observed, quote, "Today's physics allows for the existence of so-called paranormal phenomena. The whole concept of non-locality in contemporary physics requires this possibility." So there's a lot of evidence to argue these points in science. It's no longer considered fantastic. And it's being studied. They mentioned at least 6 different studies being done by really reputable facilities. Non-local experiences tend to follow a pattern. So the people themselves are often display intellectual excellence. They're masters in their field. So we're talking about people like Picasso and Brahms and these great thinkers, Tesla, that said, oh, well, I was staring out the window daydreaming, and that's how I got the theory of evolution. So they're masters in their field. They're visionaries. It's not related to IQ. IQ may be irrelevant. Most of us can't name 100 of these great thinkers, and there are at least 9 million that can be identified that people are really, really aware of. If you sit down and make a list, 9 million, and most of us can't even name 100. So Darwin observed that many clever people never create anything. You're smart, but you're not very creative. Creativity is not enlightenment. I think that's interesting to think about. People like Gauguin and Picasso, their creativity is more a function of focus. And focus often comes from neurosis. For example, Nikola Tesla, was a huge germaphobe. I didn't know that. I think that's great. So creativity, inspiration can come from consciously assumed focus. The martial arts or meditation, those are 2 forms of consciously assumed focus. And then non-local experiences, we're still talking about the pattern that they can be described as following. So it's that focus. Then there's the knowing that a solution does exist. It just, I know that I can sense that there is a solution to this issue. And for example, Einstein said, I feel certain that I'm right, and I don't know the reason why. So they take a leap of faith. They have the courage to buck convention, and they trust their creative ability. This is part of the pattern of how this leads to great discoveries. The third factor is strategies of inward looking. You need to be able to look beyond your intellect. So this kind of reflects back to the first 2. It's not brains, and it is inward focus. So meditation, gardening, certain kind of sports like darts. He mentions darts. I never think of darts as a sport. I'm not saying it isn't. I just don't think of it. Another one that he doesn't mention, probably because he's a guy, no offense, is knitting. And they have studied people's brainwaves while they knit, and they do go into a meditative state. Another way of getting into that state, and I don't recommend it, I don't advocate it, is driving. You often find yourself arriving at a location and you don't remember how you really got there. You were on what they call automatic pilot. It's a form of meditation. So the question is, could we develop training to create conditions for a creative breakthrough? So Schwartz is saying that meditation is basically mindfulness training. Mindfulness is a very popular term these days. Does a pretty good job of describing what he's talking about, that focused intention. So you need the next thing. So we've got strategies, we've got focus, we've got creativity versus IQ. And then number 4 is surrender. You have to end your intellectual struggle and do some inner listening. Quiet your brain and look within. Take a fresh, clean look at old knowledge, too. That's the other thing. We tend to dismiss, right, the ancient knowledge. Then you need a moment. The pattern involves a moment of illumination, the aha moment. He names several people who made breakthroughs on a walk or in a dream or out of thin air. So intuition and inspiration and imagination are greater than just basic knowledge. Research shows that your 10 to 20s are the window of intuition. Oh, 10 to 20 seconds. Sometimes my shorthand's a little too short. It's not the 10 to 20s, it's 10 to 20 seconds. Is that little narrow window of intuition you can tap into. Scientists and remote viewers draw as they tune in to a perception or a breakthrough. Watch Kim of Intuitive View. When she does her thing, she just sort of doodles. And that's that focus. That's that directed focus, that intention. And often, you know, someone who does that can talk about it and then go back and focus on what they've already drawn, and that even more. I think Cash Peters, in a way, does that too. So cool to be able to watch people do this. It's fascinating. The next part of the pattern is intellectual explication and verification. So Descartes came up with analytic geometry, a new philosophy based on 3 dreams that he had, and he describes one of those dreams as a lucid dream. I don't know if I'm going to belabor that. Oh, it's not too long. So he said, the guy who invented the term lucid dreaming about that said, in most of our dreams, our inner eye of reflection is shut, and we sleep within our sleep. The exception takes place when we seem to awake within our dreams without disturbing or ending the dream state, and we learn to recognize that we are dreaming while the dream is still happening. So these are descriptions of inspiration and people's dreams and inspiration that come from dreams resemble studies of intuitive events in the field of parapsychology. So somebody was studied and said, I space out and the information comes in a flash or as a hologram. That's another way somebody will receive the information. These are moments of illumination, and they will often happen to 2 people at the same time. It's uncanny. I don't know. I don't think I wrote it out, but I do think I'll mention it. Salk and Sabine both came up with vaccines for polio around the same time, slightly different from each other, but they made that breakthrough. When AIDS was decimating an entire generation, there were 2 teams of scientists trying to identify the causative microbe, the HIV, the human immunovirus that causes AIDS. And one group was in France and one group was at the CDC, I think. I don't want to misspeak, but I think that's where they were. And there was a great deal of competition about this, and they essentially came up with it roughly at the same time. And cars, airplanes, there are a number of different inventions that if you live in France, you're not told that the Wright brothers were the big flyers. There were people in France. You don't think about Henry Ford, you think about Daimler and Benz and Mercedes. It all depends on your frame of reference. I think that's pretty funny. So the human mind gives birth in more than one place at a time. These are the elementary thoughts of humankind, tuning into the information in the field. Jung called it the collective consciousness. It's a network that we interact with and we use to interact with others. The ether. Intuitive functioning and creative decision-making are often even seen in CEOs. They'll come up with similar ideas at the same time. There's a positive correlation between financial performances and high precognitive functioning. So, maybe you should consult an astrologer about your finances. And they have a cute little phrase for this. Two words that sound the same, but profits make profits. The materialist model is that Earth is a dead source of resources and consciousness is isolated in the brain and has no role in really much of anything. We live isolated lives, isolated from the Earth's meta-systems, which we now know are all united, connected. Unless the weather's bad where you live and then you kind of make the connection. But that, up until now it's in the zeitgeist, it's in the collective conversation, but it took a real long time to get there, and not everybody's bought into the notion, but nevertheless. The opposite model of that is that consciousness is of primary importance, as Max Planck said. So we're interconnected and we're an interdependent matrix of life. We live in the earth. It goes higher into the atmosphere than we realize and deeper into the earth than we realize. Our cocoon goes, sorry. Our cocoon goes deep into the earth and high above it. It's a vast interlocking system. So today there's a paradigm shift in human consciousness. As I said, we're starting to glom on to some of this stuff. It has happened before. There was a period called the axial period between 800 and 600 BC. This was the emergence of most great religions and philosophies, all within this 200-year period, and all around the globe. So to name some but not all, Confucianism, Buddha, Zoroaster, Lao Tzu, Mahavira, who founded the Jain religion, Middle Eastern monotheistic prophets, the biblical guys, and Greek philosophy, Athens democracy, all erupted on the planet at the same time. We really need to change and live in harmony with each other and with the earth, or suffer until we make compassionate, life-affirming choices for the wellness of each of us and the planet. So he mentions this throughout the book. It's really the crux of the book. The transition would be easier if we can accept non-local consciousness and this creative pattern. Now we're on chapter 12. The social implications of non-local linkage and fear. So there's been studies of iris response in the eye, and they discovered that before a picture is put up on a video screen for somebody to look at, the iris reacts. Before the picture's even shown, the iris reacts. This suggests presentiment. In other words, you look at the picture, your iris reacts. Eventually, before they even put the picture up and you're not aware what that picture is going to be, your iris reacts because somehow you have intuited whatever. They've done a number of such studies globally. This is not one little study in one corner of the world someplace. This has been done over and over, repeated, and repeated the results. They all show what they call an anticipatory effect. The eye reacts before the pictures are shown. So do other physiological measures. Measures like the EKG or the EEG. So brain waves, heart waves. The whole body is involved in this presentiment. Women seem to be more sensitive. The studies that they have done, proportionally, statistically, women seem to react more intuitively. Why is that? That's a question to answer. We can speculate. The individual experiences presentiment, and interestingly, this effect is also a social one. So we're going to talk about that. For example, there was a Princeton study of non-local perturbation. So making an effect somewhere else. And I'm sorry, Stephan, but we have to use the terminology of distance just because that's how our brains work. But making something happen outside of your brain, elsewhere. So they got people to affect random number generators. And these are some kind of machines that generate numbers randomly. And I don't know what they're used for. Probably the lottery. I don't know. But they were able to get all these people to focus. And they were able to quantify and show with data that the focused attention actually affected the number generators. It was an objectively verified collective expression. And there's an explanation for it here. Let's hope that it's not too long and all. Well, you're going to read the book anyway, so this is just a synopsis. Subtle interactions link us with each other and the earth. When the human consciousness becomes coherent and synchronized, the behavior of random systems may change. Quantum event-based random number generators produce completely unpredictable sequences of zeros and ones. But when a great event synchronizes the feelings of millions of people, our network of those random number generators becomes subtly structured. The probability is less than 1 in a billion that this effect is due to chance. The evidence suggests an emerging noosphere, or the unifying field of consciousness described by sages in all cultures, the ether. Coherent consciousness creates order in the world. And this is scientists that are showing this with data. So it would, wait, let me go back, I skipped something. Oh, so coherent consciousness creates order in the world. And so I wrote in the margin, does this go anywhere in trying to understand things like MAGA and the Nazis, or civil rights, a collective consciousness to bring about change? Might the cataclysmic emotional effects of coastal submergence cause a presentiment reaction? So people are freaking out, and is that causing a reaction in the collective? It would probably register in you as a feeling of stress, or a feeling of fear of an unknown origin, an existential fear. So this begs the question, and I should write this down because I think this would be a good question for the cards. Do we focus on the problem, thereby creating our own fear, or does the existence of the problem subliminally create in us fear? So I'm going to write that down. So do we create the fear for ourselves, or does the problem create the fear, create an emotional, collective emotional effect? There's the potential that it activates the amygdala. These things are explainable. It affects the amygdala, and that would be responsible for what's known as the heroic response, to give your life to save your life, I'm sorry, to save your life from a perceived threat. So there's a greater conservatism in society right now because of this neurological response. Conservatives have less capacity for handling complexity. That's been shown. They also have been measurably shown to have less courage and less optimism. So we're talking about something neurological happening in the amygdala in response to the environment, because we're all connected to the environment. And as a result, you get a group of people that react differently because their amygdalas are different. So this is neuroscience. Neuroscience is politics. Or is it the chicken or the egg? They're still studying it. Brain structure and political attitudes seem to be in a feedback loop. They seem to go hand in hand. The desire for authoritarianism is built into the brain. And so is our fear actually precognitive? And in a strange way, this is P.S., this is me, not the book. In a strange way, I find this almost validating because some closely related people tell me, you know, you worry too much about this stuff. You think too much about this stuff. Don't pay attention to it and it won't bother you so much. But what these studies are showing is that there's a portion of the population that's picking up on the existential threat out of the ether. Not everybody has the capability, but not everybody nurtures it. And in very much the same way as some people are really buff, and then there are those of us who aren't. Some people work at it. We're all capable of it to whatever extent. Some people consciously develop their muscles. Some people consciously develop their psychic muscles. It's available to everybody. It's how we choose to nurture it. And it's in the ether. It's in the matrix. It's in the collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The earth is telling us of this existential threat. Some people are picking up on it and feeling that threat more acutely than other people. Some people who are conservative feel that fear, and their reaction is a particular political point of view. What you do with the feeling as you interpret it is up to the individual. So you could be a right-wing person and have a degree of intuition and be picking up on this, and this fear, they can't handle it. And, you know, a lot of people can't handle it, and understandably so. It's existential. So we have to reduce the fear. So if you look at the earth and we look at our relationship to the earth as one with interacting with the matrix, a oneness, we are in a bath of beingness. This is called naked awareness. So chapter 13, the psychophysiology of politics. Yikes. So behavior is partly genetic, partly emotional. Fear, peer pressure, prejudice, lots of powerful manipulators that are affecting our behavior. American democracy is based on the belief that politics depend on rational discourse and a response to objective reality, discussion, compromise, debate, compromise. For example, the Constitutional Convention, 55 men with a lot of self-interest, landowning men, white men. After 3 months of debate and compromise, 39 of the 55 signed the original Constitution. But this is not happening in our legislative bodies anymore. What if today psychophysiology, what we're seeing is psychophysiology without a conscious awakeness and a conscious awareness, and it's driving politics without rational thought. Research supports this, that they're being driven, the people messing things up, are being driven by hormones, by group dynamics, and response to negative stimuli. And this has a greater power and impact on the outcome. Bad stuff has a stronger impact, has more of an impact. The bad is stronger than the good across a broad range of psychological phenomena. And this has been explored. This is what the data show, and it's been explored by the University of Nebraska. And what they have found is that they set out to explore this issue. Quote, "We argue that one organizing element of the many differences between liberals and conservatives is the nature of their physiological and psychological responses to features of the environment that are negative. Compared with liberals, conservatives tend to register greater physiological response to such stimuli and also to devote more psychological resources to them. Politics might not be in our souls, but it probably is in our DNA." This is them speaking, these scientists. For example, your moral judgment can be influenced by a bad smell or a messy room. They did studies at the University of Plymouth in England and the University of Virginia and at Stanford, and they found that circumstantial sensorial experiences can provoke disgust, can cause severe moral judgments. So when your neighbor's house is really a pigsty, you will very possibly think less of them as people. It is a process. Physiological, psychological process. So, they did this study. They had this messy room, and they had things like, we want you to fill out this form. Here's a pen, but the pen had been chewed on. And the room smelled bad. And the questionnaire they were filling out was a questionnaire about moral judgments, about specific events or people or whatever. And then they compared those results to the same questions being asked of participants in a very pleasant, clean, tidy, nice-smelling environment. They also asked questions in this questionnaire about their physiological response. Things like, I know when my mouth gets dry, and things like that. So they found a causal relationship between physical disgust and moral condemnation. So when you say that somebody disgusts you, you really mean it. So how does this play out? For example, if they bring politics into a church and they're doing voter registration in a church, or they're telling you how to vote in a church, which right-wing conservative churches do all the time, and I'm a witness to that. I have used the ladies' room during church services on a Sunday morning at a very conservative church in town, and I was so shocked. They pipe in the sermons into the bathroom. I was so shocked I recorded it on my phone and took it home and showed my husband, and we both went, that's against the law, right? That's against you're not supposed, separation of church and state. So another thing is, if you vote in a school, if you vote in a school library, you're more inclined to vote liberally, because the school library evokes this left-wing kind of thing. So you can manipulate the vote by your choice of polling place. If you go vote at your church, according to what they've been telling you, you might make more conservative choices than if you vote in a school library. Some people are more susceptible. They're more easily manipulated, and it's not good to follow. They think it's not good to follow your intuition or your feelings. And you shouldn't if you're making moral decisions, because it's too easy to manipulate your intuition and your feelings on a moral basis, using morality. It's too easy. You have to prepare a little better than that. The relevance of subthreshold factors allows for the possibility that political temperament is systemically related to a range of physiological and psychological response patterns. And I could have gone into this in great depth, and I haven't, because this is just the chart that they use, and then they explain this big entire chart. So we're going to take a little bit of this, pardon the pun, on faith. So Negativity bias in values are the most relative to our political decisions. Once again, the bad rather than the good has more effect. And this explains the things that worry the right wing versus the things that worry the left wing. Core values and goals were studied in this particular study. Values of universalism, which is the understanding, appreciation, tolerance, and protection of the welfare of other people and nature. Self-direction, independent thought and action, choosing, creating, exploring. Security, safety, harmony, stability of society, of relationships, and of yourself. Conformity, restraint of actions, inclinations and impulses likely to upset or harm others and violate social expectations or norms. And finally, tradition, respect for, commitment to, and acceptance of the customs and ideas that traditional culture or religion provide. And they did a Gallup poll, and they found a strong relationship between religion and party ID. I think we kind of know that. Well, the left-wing people, and this is based on personal reporting. I'm left-wing, I vote liberal, I vote progressive, I'm not religious. I'm right-wing, I vote conservative, I vote Republican, I vote authoritarian, I'm very Christian. The activation of the amygdala and its effects, very strong on politics. There's increased right amygdala, let me say this better. The more right you are, your amygdala is involved and you get more conservative. And if you're, instead of using your amygdala, you're using your gray matter, you're dealing with complexity, you're also dealing with attitudes. The conservative brain is a smaller area, and it's responsible for courage and optimism. So conservatives have a smaller courage, smaller optimism response. And that gray matter increases in activity and size. That's how you deal with complexity, and it's bigger in liberals. The amygdala is bigger in conservatives, or the response is bigger in conservatives. And if you're liberal, you're more likely predisposed by the construction and function of your brain to courage, optimism, and the ability to handle complexity and tolerate ambiguity. It's like it's a life-affirming agent. This is the psychophysiology of politics. This is not theory. This has been shown with data. And it's now shaping our world. Neurologist Geraint Rees says that there is something about political attitudes that are either encoded in our brain structure through our experience, or that our brain structure in some way determines or results in our political attitudes. This explains why we can't seem to face it explains why we have such a hard time facing lists of crises. We can't work for our own self-preservation while looking at all these crises. So we're driven by forces we don't really know and forces we don't really understand, having to do with our neurobiology. Cultural cognition thesis is the idea that we are psychologically disposed to believe that behavior that we find honorable is socially beneficial, and that we find base is detrimental. In other words, we think we're the good guys and the people that we don't agree with are doing bad things. It's an unconscious bias. It's influencing our perceptions of credibility. Therefore, anyone who has a particular opinion will deny information of those who don't share their opinion, their worldview. Fox News watchers. For most people, being accepted by a group and protecting their own status is more important than facts. Let me say that again. For most people, to be a part of a group and to protect their status in that group is their primary goal. They don't care about the facts. So their life and their politics are shaped by psychophysiological influences, not conscious knowledge. There's a negativity bias. They're the bad guys because they're different than how we feel. Our morals are right, theirs are wrong, and the bad things have more influence. And we tend to be protective of status and our group network. We're more, which are all more important than actual facts, and it makes us vulnerable to manipulation and fear, to peer conformity, to prejudice. And he says that voters are manipulated even against their own self-interest, and this explains why. So our future depends on how we respond to this, and first you have to be aware of it, right? So James McKinney, MD, was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention. You know, they came up with the convention. They came up with the Constitution. And outside the door, this story is it's a woman, but that's not true. So James McKinney went outside, one of the delegates, and on the way out the door, he asked Benjamin Franklin, so, Benjamin, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? And famously, Benjamin Franklin responded, a republic if you can keep it. Franklin fully understood the impact of individual choices. You know, we've talked about him. Also, the importance of keeping the wellness of the group a number one priority. And to profit, if you must, but to do it ethically, and it is possible. We can overcome neurophysiology with conscious daily, compassionate, life-affirming choices, and we can empower ourselves by doing that. So that was a heavy chapter. There was a lot in that chapter to try to understand. It's all cutting-edge science and fascinating. I hope you read this book, and I hope you recommend it to other people. This is a paradigm shift. That one chapter, chapter 13. I'm going to end this video, and we will finish the book in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget, if you choose to skip, you know, the rest of the book because you'd rather just read it yourself, remember that I'm putting up a conversation I had with Stephan Schwartz, the author, talking about this book in depth, and we get off on some great sidetracks. It's broken into 2 parts, not 2 halves, but 2 parts because of a phone call. And it got better and better as we went along, so I'm hoping you'll stick with it. You can always put it on pause and come back. Slongafoil, Sláinte.